So, one of the key parts of Beyond 2022 is developing tools to help researchers navigate exactly the sort of documents Elizabeth has just shown us in TNA. Unlike other collections we'll find in the virtual record treasury, the history of the medieval exchequer is built on the actions and the interactions of thousands of historical people. So, what we need is a tool that can reflect the complexity of those historical relationships and the connections we find in the past. And one of these tools is the Knowledge Graph for Irish history. This is where we use semantic web technologies to discover connections between people and places across 7 centuries of Irish history. The knowledge graph goes beyond a traditional database. It gives us a way of structuring information so that a computer doesn't just store it, but also starts to understand it. And we do this by standardizing how we represent historical data that we find in textual sources so that it becomes comprehensible to machines as well as to people. Now, our computer scientists in ADAPT do this using a data model called RDF, or Resource Description Framework. RDF triple stores handle massive amounts of data from all kinds of sources, and they also let us add new data so that we'll be able to grow the knowledge graph. It becomes a dynamic resource for researchers. And because our knowledge graph is being built as a linked open data resource, we'll be able to connect information about Irish history in our graph to other graphs and link data on the semantic web. So how does it work? The documents Elizabeth just introduced us to are especially rich as records of historical people, places, offices, and organizations. And this is exactly the type of data we want to add to our knowledge graph. People like John Wogan, the justiciar, or Arnold, the Italian merchant, or Christina, the wealthy heiress, all exist as what we call person entities in the knowledge graph. Locations like the Manor of Bray or Dublin or Waterford are place entities. The Treasurer is an office entity. The Exchequer itself is an organisation entity. And we can visualize how this works. And this is a demo on screen that I recorded earlier with Dr. Fabrizio Orlandi in ADAPT. And here we can see John Wogan, who Elizabeth pointed out earlier. We already know one office he held was Justiciar of Ireland, but the graph allows us to connect him to all of the other Irish justiciars too. And even if we chose all chief governors of Ireland right up to the 20th century. This is because the graph is made up of interlinked descriptions of entities, which we've extracted from historical texts. Now, historians can add new entities to the graph manually, but we're also using natural language processing technologies to automatically extract entities from our sources and add them to the knowledge graph. So then, as you can see on screen at the moment, we can use the graph to explore connections between these individuals. Here, we've added a second role, Archbishop of Dublin, into the mix. And now we can discover which individuals held both positions during their careers. John Wogan didn't, but we can see here that one of his contemporaries, Alexander Bicknor, did. Now, the kind of information that we capture is meant to make the knowledge graph as useful as possible to researchers. So for historical people, for instance, we capture information about family relationships, occupations, dates of birth and death, and so on, as well as things like variant spellings of forenames and surnames. And this is important. This is the kind of thing that helps us identify the same entity across multiple historical texts or distinguish between entities with the same name. For instance, here's another individual Elizabeth mentioned. This is Art MacMurrough, King of Leinster. Now, because multiple variants of his name appear in our sources, it's very important that we capture all of them. And you can see on screen all of the different variants that we've captured for just one individual's surname. You can also see how we can link Art MacMurrough with other individuals called MacMurrough too. Within the graph, we can also identify variant spellings of historical place names, and then we can relate them to their modern geographical equivalents, placing them within a hierarchy too. All of this data ultimately can be used to provide background or contextual information about these entities, or to discover related entities, or identify the connections between these different people and places in our records. So far, we've focused on examples from medieval Ireland, But the graph has a much broader chronological range, obviously, and it allows us to trace connections from the medieval to the early modern, right up to the 20th century. And one of our most exciting additions to the graph has come from our collaboration with the Royal Irish Academy's Dictionary of Irish Biography team, where we've worked together to add structured data for over 10,000 individuals in the DIB into the knowledge graph. And on screen, you can see we started with another Art McMurrough. Now, this McMurrough falls under the tags politics and Gaelic lords. And we've also now been able to explore the people who shared these characteristics, these tags, men like the 17th century soldier you're seeing on screen, Aid O'Byrne. And from Aid, we could jump forward and explore more historical individuals from this period. We could see how he was connected to other people and places in Ireland. And as we start to add more data to the graph and link our data with other data sets like the DIB, the graph becomes more powerful, more useful as a resource to us. So to finish up, this is just one snapshot of one of the tools we're building, but hopefully it's given you a sense of what we can do with humanities researchers and computer scientists working together to unlock our records and what the knowledge graph can offer. And that's really to give us a new way to explore Irish history from the medieval material you've just seen to all of the other collections we'll hear about later today. Thanks very much.